BoJack Horseman is a fantastic show about many assets of life. Despite what the titular character might have you believe, not all of these are represented around and through the character of BoJack. What I would like to explore with you today instead is the character of Diane Nyguen. I will preface this discussion with the notion that I am not doing an introspective or analysis of the character of Diane. It has been done before, and with more experience, perhaps I will tackle this one day. The purpose of this video lies instead with solely opinionated matters around Diane's interpretation, her introduction, evolution, and ultimate conclusion. Specifically, I would like to focus on that conclusive element. Diane's most notable episode, and I believe completion in the show, is Season 6, Episode 10, Good Damage. I'd like to explore the idea that the writer's conclusive arc for Diane is actually a trap, one that encompasses tragedy and downfall, even if it is not readily apparent. This comes from an acceptance of her situation and consequent settlement, that she is unable to fulfill her ambitions as an academic and influential writer, failing to make every tormenting act she's been through worth something. This is something that encompasses my own personal fears, as well as one that I believe an earlier Diane would hold. I think this would be the case for many viewers too, who find themselves in the character of Diane. I'd then like to counter-argue this with the author's very clear perspective that ultimately Diane ends up happy. I will show these two ideas in contrast in what we can take away from the character of Diane, attempting to balance and find a conclusion on the notion of making your damage mean something, as I believe it to be a very important question. In order to understand this interpretation, it is first important to understand Diane's past. What exactly motivates her, where she comes from, and how this has affected her development. Firstly, Diane suffered an upbringing in a neglectful and belittling household in Boston. Being the only daughter in a family of 4 brothers, Diane was often the victim of their ridiculing. One can recall the Cryan video, which saw the brothers create a fake pen pal communication with Diane for 6 months, resulting in the hiring of a homeless man pretending to be her pen pal Leo and take Diane to homecoming, which saw Diane break down in tears. This was subsequently taped and supposedly played every day in their household. Diane's parents not only permitted this behavior but further perpetuated it. Diane describes her father as a mean, sadistic alcoholic who never supported anything she did and actively delighted in seeing her fail. Whilst we're unaware of exactly Diane's mother's influence in Diane's developmental years, we see her guilt-trip Diane during her adult years for leaving the family to make something of herself, insisting that Diane must do more to help the family the same way she does, in a very traditional setting. Diane's school life was occupied by her bully Chrissy, where Diane recalls being stuffed into a locker and forced to eat lipstick. Diane is noted to have a distinct lack of friends during this time, bar one named Abby, whom ultimately used Diane's secrets to gain popularity and further her bullying. Diane was diagnosed with depression during her college years, but did not continue her use of medication following her weight gain and changed into someone else she describes as lifeless and boring. This of course takes us to the Diane we first see in the setting of BoJack's Hollywood, woo, whatever you want to call it, working as a barista and aspiring writer. To which of course she would be hired as BoJack's ghostwriter and get her first glimpse of success. This portrayal of Diane shows someone who was frequently damaged and pulled down despite her genuine talent, interest, passion, and hard work. And again, despite these continuous setbacks, Diane found success. She completed her degree, moved to Los Angeles, ghostwrote a bestseller, and became a compassionate yet fiercely passionate advocate for her beliefs. However, throughout the show, Diane still continues to suffer. The treatment of Diane never really improves, and neither does her situation. Whether it's the letters of death threats and hate mail she receives, the failure to address her needs and be understood by her partners, or her own inability to find meaning and purpose, evident by her struggles with Cordovia. Further, the lack of acknowledgement of her work and views, the poor treatment she receives from those close to her, all these factors accumulate to show that Diane's struggle with depression never actually goes away. This provides crucial context for our ultimate conclusion of good damage. Following her relationship with Guy, who convinces her to move to Chicago with him, Diane begins writing her memoir of personal essays with a 6-month advancement from Princess Carolyn. This is Diane's ultimate life work. This will provide her abusive upbringing meaning. Everything she has been through, all the trauma she has endured, Diane holds a philosophy that this makes you who you are. This is the good damage, and consequently, it will shape her writing into something beautiful. However, she is incapable of writing, as attempting to provides her with great suffering, a point I will return to in my counter-argument. Consequently, Diane, in a moment of thought-wandering at the food mall, creates the idea of Ivy Tran, Food Court Detective, a children's fiction detective series. As we know, this is a genuinely good and successful idea in BoJack Horseman that she executes successfully. Yet her initial reaction is one of disdain, for the primary reason of, if she doesn't write her book of essays, it means all the trauma and abuse she endured was for nothing.
Have fun. If I don't write my book of essays now, I never will.
So, don't write your book of essays.
I have to.
Why?
Because if I don't, that means that all the damage I got isn't good damage. It's just damage. I have gotten nothing out of it, and all those years I was miserable was for nothing. I could have been happy this whole time, and written books about girl detectives, and been cheerful, and popular, and had good parents. Is that what you're saying? What was it all for?
This single line, this one line, hit me like a truck, and I'm sure it did for many members of the audience, too. It is the epitome and climax of Diane's character. Everything we've witnessed her go through concludes at this point. To make something of the damage you've suffered. Is Ivy Tran nothing more than a clear rejection of that idea and acceptance of your suffering? And if so, is that problematic? Here is the point I shift away from the show's writing and provide a cynical, perhaps flavoured by my own interpretation and opinions. This is of course in no way objective nor correct, and I would be very interested in hearing what others think. Diane accepts her position. She returns to a large urban city, one that has been often described as paralleling Boston, in Chicago. She becomes part of a relationship and hangs up her aspirational, influential, and academic writing to write children's novella. One could argue that this is the downfall. Whilst there is of course nothing wrong with writing children's books, I certainly know I would not be capable of producing such a successful series. For Diane specifically, it is a complete rejection of her past and acceptance in comfort. Her drive, ambition, and desire to change the world for the better is crushed in this moment of acceptance. I cannot see how it is possible to live with this. To make everything you have been through be for nothing is a consuming thought that would leave me full of regret and grief for a future that never happened. I'd like to compare this with one of my all-time favourite films, I Saw the TV Glow. I think this is pretty major spoilers, so please skip ahead to this timestamp if you're interested in seeing this film. Despite being a trans allegory, the film can be interpreted as a universal life unlived to many different areas in people's lives. The failure to find your true self, to live the life you want to live, to create meaningful change and to be proud of that identity, instead opting to settle with expectations imposed upon you. It is soul-crushing. Yet, what we see when this is executed in the show as a result of this is a happy Diane, a comfortable, confident, and successful Diane. This perspective is clearly not one the authors agree with, and contrast this with how Diane felt during her writing process, failing to produce anything in 6 months, breaking down, throwing up, writing and saying how terrible she is, and ultimately getting suicidal thoughts. The prospect of writing this book places an enormous amount of pressure and strain on Diane that she simply cannot cope with. This is a direct manifestation of her need to satisfy her past abusers in proving them wrong, simply self-perpetuating the awful damage they had imposed on her. Her subsequent rejection of this idea sets her free, and perhaps this is the real use of good damage that is shown. Contrasting this again with I Saw the TV Glow, which is a psychological horror, see the protagonist break down, accepting the life imposed upon them and unable to move forwards with their own desires. The writers of BoJack Horseman clearly view a different version of events for Diane. She is someone who rejects societal expectations and finds her own true self in writing these children's novels. The only thing that matters from the writer's perspective, and the key 3 words needed to disprove this video's title: Diane is happy. The ambition, the pursuit, the effort was constantly shown in a negative light. Yet in hanging up those goals and settling for what calls to her, she becomes happy. If we are to learn anything from Diane, is it not that comfort is good? I don't know. It's hard to be honest. Diane is a character so many, myself included, can consistently relate to. An inspiring writer who's been damaged by their circumstances, but wants to do everything they can to better themselves, in turn allowing them to better the world, and in doing so, prove those offenders who did them wrong that they were worth more. Is this goal petty, problematic, self-damaging? The show wants us to believe that the hell you put yourself through in the pursuit of these goals is not worth it, and that finding comfort is simply much happier. But I don't like that. Part of me wants to like that, to say that this perspective must be correct because it brings Diane joy, and that should be the ultimate goal in life. If you're happy, what else matters? But how long does that happiness last? How long is it before you lose that comfortable relationship? How long before you look back at your work and feel you could have achieved so much more? How long before you see academics and writers discussing their works with each other and you feel inadequate for the production of children's books? How long is it before that regret kicks in? I pose that comfort is temporary, that Diane's arc is not finished. I know I would have these thoughts. I find it easy to believe that she would too. This comfort is an easy diversion, as opposed to challenging these very tough insecurities and ideas. There is a lack of reconciliation in her past, and more of an acceptance in her circumstances, which I would argue only serves to distract as opposed to heal. It is through this lens I would put forth Diane's settlement for Mediocrity, a tragic reality that I think Season 1 Diane would be disgusted by. Please, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this. It's something that has plagued my mind ever since watching the show. I think it's a very interesting concept to explore what exactly good damage means, and I'd love if there's any, I don't know, psychology students or, psychology workers in that field have any research studies on this sort of topic. I would be very interested in reading them. I think it is a fascinating idea, and I think BoJack Horseman explains it and explores it in a fantastic way, and I really do like the outcome that they pose for Diane. But yeah, it's really hard to believe and empathize with it when I'm still so much earlier on in the process than Diane is at the moment. So yeah, please let me know what you think. I think this is a very cynical and naive take that one could hold, but I think it's interesting nonetheless, and I think it's definitely something that we've probably all thought at one point, even if it's not the final and correct. I would absolutely love to be corrected. I just think it's interesting to pose this little thought experiment. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. That's all. Goodbye.